everybody. Welcome to the Improv Summit. Thank you so much for joining me here. It's me. I'm your host, Spencer, of course. But with me today, I've got someone very exciting. Dominica, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. Let's dive right in. I don't want to keep the viewers or the listeners waiting. Let's just dive right in. Tell me a little bit about your improv background.
Right. Well, I actually started getting into improv 20 years ago. Back when I lived in Australia, I was into stand-up comedy, but then I went to like the Melbourne Comedy Festival and started like learning a little bit about improv theater live on stage at comedy festivals then. But I didn't start really taking classes and stuff until I moved to San Francisco, which is I live across the bay from San Francisco, which was back in 2014 is when I started classes.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, I think what's interesting is I've known that a lot of people are like, I've got to do improv, but you can also do improv later in life, or you can also discover it, whenever. It's not like you have to do it at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
If it speaks to you, do it. If it doesn't speak to you, maybe see if it speaks to you later. But I was like, oh, I know how to improvise, and then I moved out to LA and realized I've taken a couple of improv classes and I can pick it up pretty quickly. But the actual structure of it all was a lot. There was a lot, and my brain lived for it. But then it also had to figure out the creative aspect. Anyway, what specifically drew you to improv? Why did you decide to take an improv class or start doing improv?
Well, I guess, when I was in high school, I was really into, like, I wanted to be an actor. Like, that's what I wanted to do. But I hated learning lines. Like, I didn't feel like I could remember lines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when I discovered that you could do it without having lines, so like that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like being into stand-up comedy was a big part of what drew me to it. But again, memorizing and writing material, not the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
like just doing stuff off the top of my head. I met a bunch of improvisers that kind of drew me to it as well, because they were like exciting people, interesting people that I wanted to get to know better. And what better way to do it but doing improv too.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So much about improv that you can figure out at a very quick amount of time, but also sometimes you take a long time to figure it out. Anyway, speaking of finding time to figure out improv or figuring it out, there's so many different types of improv, which I don't think a lot of people realize. There's so many different types. And there's everything from like short form to long form, narrative, genre, musical, two prov, three prov, eight prov, which is just a normal size Herald form. But there's so many different types of improv. Do you have any specific types of improv that you either really love or that you remember like learning and you're like, I like this? And on that note as well, if it's any short form, do you have a favorite short form game or any warm-ups that help you get in the zone before an improv show?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I've been to a bunch of improv festivals. I mean, I know I started out with the Melbourne Comedy Festival, which is a range of stuff, but I've been to a bunch of improv festivals, so I've seen quite a variety. I tend to be more drawn to the theatrical style, like that has the costuming and like narrative type story stuff. My own improv that I've developed, like the show that I've done the most, that I've taken to most festivals, is a reality TV style improv show, where I get 3 different guests and interview them like they're interviewing for a job interview, but I interview them all at the same time, and they don't know what they're actually interviewing for. I get the suggestion from the audience for the particular job. They think they're coming to a regular job interview. And then I have my audience vote for their favorite contestant to get the job, and they're usually very not qualified at all.
That's awesome.
And then so then whoever the winning contestant is, we do a bunch of like narrative like story about that character, so that's fun. I like experimental stuff. I've also done like non-verbal improv. So I have this show that doesn't use words in its name. It's just like square brackets. And yeah, and so we don't use words, and we're just like really weird on stage. We do noises. Just get really
Well,
weird.
there's something about though about nonverbal improv, because one of the notes that I always hear when I'm taking classes is let the scene breathe. You don't need to just keep talking. There are moments where you can fill the space by doing object work or making sounds or not speaking. It's okay to not talk in a scene. And I think that that fascinates me because it almost is a skill that wish a lot of improvisers practice more, is not talking in a scene, because there's so much to explore in the space.
Well, for me, because I'm autistic, I think I'm just naturally drawn to that because it's
Hmm.
hard for me to generate words sometimes.
Oh, I hear you
My,
on that
the
one.
way my brain works.
Hmm.
So I actually was originally inspired by this group out of Honolulu, Hawaii. They're called On the Spot, and they have this show called Hush, and it's a silent movie format.
Mm.
But I was in Honolulu years ago when I was still living in Malaysia. Before I moved here, when I was living in Malaysia, I flew to Honolulu to see some friends who were improvisers. And then while I was there, I took this workshop with an improviser who is visiting from LA, Deanna Fleischer. And through, like, she has like clowning background, and in that workshop we had to do some silent stuff.
Mm.
And I was like terrified because this was before I'd really done much improv yet. And I was seeing like everyone else struggle with doing all of this silent stuff. And so I was like the last one to volunteer.
That's so
but
funny.
then but then while I was volunteering, I was just reacting and just doing my thing, and it wasn't scary at all, and everyone was just like cracking up.
Mm.
And afterwards, Garrick, who's the leader of On the Spot, he's the guy that kind of organizes their whole group. He told me that he could have watched an entire show of me just laughing and like not saying anything. And I'm like, what is this a thing that I can do? This is great.
That's so awesome.
That's kind of what started me on the silent stuff.
I love it. It's like a genre all on its own, is like silent improv or nonverbal improv, and it also is interesting. It is one of those things where there's like this idea of like anxiety for or improv for anxiety, like people have anxiety, or improv for autism, which is because autism is such a wide range of varying abilities. And it's fascinating how a lot of times improv is so specific to like, this is how it's done, and if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. But it's like there might be some really talented individuals who are not great at speaking, but you give them a nonverbal improv scene, they're like can soar, and it's so funny. You understand exactly what's going on, but it's one of those things where if we as a community made improv more accessible by doing these types of things, exploring these things. Like I know for me, I'm not a scenic game kind of person. That's not me. I'm also not a very physical person. I have partial blindness, so giving me a very physical game doesn't do anything for me. It's not going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But doing things like I'm also not great at object work, which you might notice throughout this interview. I'm not great with object work,
Look,
but
object stuff doesn't work over Zoom anyway.
yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, but I keep doing this for typing, and so because my computer's way up here.
Right.
But it's like I love musical stuff. I know other people don't, but it's like this idea of like if I'm able to stretch my muscles by doing a physical game where I can't even see half of what's going on, I feel it's only fair to maybe do something that I really enjoy that someone else doesn't necessarily resonate with, because we're exploring all these different types of improv and seeing what works and what doesn't. I've done a lot of moving bodies in my life. There's a lot of problems with that game nowadays, but and when it first started, but moving bodies, I just can't see because I'm not able to move in a scene, and so I can't see my scene partner. I don't have peripheral vision on one side of my body. So like those, anyways, enough about me.
No, you're just making me realize that that could be why working with somebody who is used hearing aids, like he and I worked so well together because I didn't talk a lot.
Mhm.
And it didn't even occur to me that might have influenced how we were able to work well so well.
Yeah, and you don't think about the pairings, and I think it's also like another thing with like accessibility. Like, I know that for me, visual stuff is not going to be great for me, but if I know that someone's doing something visual, I can focus on it because I'm like, oh, they're doing something visual. I need to watch and see what's happening. But then if that person's doing something visual and they also start talking a lot, I'm so focused on what they're doing visually so I can make sure I understand what they're doing that I'm missing what they're saying. So it's like, and then again, it's also like, I don't want to be like, hey, everyone, this is me. Hello, I have a disability. Like, I don't want to say that because then I feel like, well, now everyone's going to be like, well, oh, So that made no sense at all what I just said. But the point is, I think it's like understanding ways and identifying ways to make improv accessible literally for everyone, because people say improv is for everyone, but in the way it was created, it really isn't for everyone.
Right.
And I think
No,
that's something.
I feel like disability is one of those areas that is not as widely talked about in the diverse backgrounds that people come to improv with.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm gonna clean my glasses off for that one because the amount of times I've said that when I've submitted for for diversity scholarships and disability is left off the list of diversity categories, I'm like, all right, listen.
I submitted to something and disability was not listed. I'm like, by the way, I'm also autistic.
Mhm.
But I mean, I can apply for those for other reasons because I'm bisexual as well and woman.
Yeah, sure, exactly. Well, even then, it's like, so that happened once as I was looking for a scholarship, and I'm like, you listed every possible thing under the sun for diversity. I said, what about disability? And the response I got from that company, a big company, was, yes, that is okay. Just keep in mind, however, that we don't have elevator access. We only have a staircase. So my first thought was, that's a problem. You only have a staircase, so it's not accessible,
Mhm.
first and foremost. Secondly, you're just acting as if disability is one specific thing. Like, oh, people who are in wheelchairs, that's the only disability there is. Not true at all. And even then, there are people in wheelchairs. There are some people who have no mobility in their legs, but there are some people who have certain disorders that need a wheelchair on some days and don't need a wheelchair on others. So
Right.
maybe one day they can walk up the stairs to class, but the next day they can't take the class because they can't physically walk up the stairs, or people who can't physically walk up the stairs. And it's like, it's this weird like gray line of like historical building versus ADA versus all of this. And what people don't realize is, I think the ADA has only been around for like 30 years at this point.
Mhm.
It hasn't been around that long. And so I think it's like, oh, well, this and that and the other has been around longer, so we should focus on that. But it's like, why can't we focus on everything at once? Like, I know it's
Right.
a lot, but these needs are different, but the accessibility you can make improv accessible for everyone in one swoop. Like, that's not hard. Maybe the needs specifically might need to be varied and different, but if we're talking about creating an inclusive space for BIPOC, an inclusive space for LGBTQIA plus, we can also talk about creating an inclusive space for women, older adults who are taking improv, people with disabilities, everything and everyone. You can make it inclusive all at the same time.
Yes,
Like,
no, I agree. That's one of
so
my like passion kind of things.
yeah.
Since because I was only like diagnosed and learned I was autistic within the last 3 years, so
Oh, okay.
like diagnosed later in life, kind of thing through getting my son diagnosed. Like
Hmm.
answering all the questions about him was what made me realize that what I thought was normal because it was normal for me
Hmm.
was not actually normal.
You're like, wait a second. These also, I'm a yes for all of these too. So wait, hold on. Let me double back. Let me check on
Pretty
this. Hold on.
much. Yeah. So it's only been like since then that I've actually put more effort into researching or like learning more about disability issues. Like I follow a lot of um, disabled people on Twitter of different types of disabilities, just so that I'm more aware of the issues. It's hard to grasp because
Hmm.
everyone has their different things that they can and can't do. But it's helping me try and be more accessible.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because I also, and this might be the conversation where this whole thing is going, which is fine. It needs to be said, but there's this idea of like white privilege, which I have because I'm a white guy. However, I'm also Greek Mediterranean, and somehow our ethnicity kind of was erased throughout time, and it just became white. So I've run into the white privilege thing growing up, like having white privilege, but socioeconomically and having a disability, those are separate from white privilege. Those are completely different things, but I get grouped into you're just a white guy. And I remember being specifically when I asked someone, how can I make my show more diverse? I've got BIPOC, I've got LGBTQIA plus. I have a disability. My director is a woman. My composer is a black woman. All of this stuff, and I was told I'm a white guy touting that I have an invisible disability, so I can say I'm diverse. And I was like that. I was like being white and having a disability are not. They don't go hand in hand. They're two separate things. They're
Right.
two separate identities. So you're basically what this person was saying is because I'm white, I can't have a disability,
It's
which
ridiculous.
which is so ridiculous. And it's like it's so funny to it's like why who thinks this way? But it's like also that's another thing is like sometimes you don't see the disability.
Right.
Sometimes you don't know that someone has a disability. And that's where things with like uh people with different disabilities where like I said, some days they're like I feel great. I'm going to walk. And then some days it's like I just cannot move my body. I've got to use my chair to move around.
Right.
And
And autism can be like that as well. Some
mhm
days I'm completely fine, and other days sensory overload,
mhm
crash down, kind
uh-huh.
of thing.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I don't know if I have autism, but I have a sensory processing disorder. I'm pretty sure. I'm more self-diagnosed, but like loud sounds really like freak me out. Like fireworks, sirens, balloons popping. I cannot stand balloons at all. It's the texture, it's the feel, it's the smell, it's the sound. Like everything about balloons freak me out. And I know it's a weird like irrational fear, but like they just for whatever reason they drive me nuts. And like silverware, I can't use silverware because when it touches my teeth, it makes me like feel like I'm at the dentist. So I have like
It's
these weird like
uncomfortable. Yeah.
and I think it's a little bit of like maybe a little bit of synesthesia. Like when I taste something, I see something or I feel something. But I think it's more of a sensory processing disorder where there are certain things that I feel a little bit more like more of an overload of like this siren feels so much bigger than it is, or like fireworks just constantly going off. No one seems to care, but I'm like, like so I get that. And balloons, like it's the worst when a balloon pops. I like tense up and like can't move, and everyone's like, it's just a balloon popping. I'm like, no, but you don't understand how like it freaks me out. And
Right.
so I think
You know,
that
I didn't even know that sensory processing was an issue for autistic people until I was like answering all the questions for my son for his diagnosis. And
mhm.
then I started thinking about my own stuff. I'm like, oh, that's maybe why I don't like touching raw meat.
Mhm.
Especially like ground meat and just like
Yep.
ugh, just don't like touching it, just it feels gross.
I can't. I'm the same way, but with fish, I can't. I don't like touching fish for whatever reason. It's fish. I don't like fish in general, so I don't usually touch it or eat it. But like, I also have this thing of like, I can't see the eyeballs of anything I'm gonna eat. If I see the eyeballs, forget it. I
Oh,
don't
and
want it.
I'm the same way. I when I was living in Malaysia, I went on this trip once, and we went to this like kind of out of like middle of nowhere place, hawker stall, and I ordered like deep fried fish, thinking expecting American style deep fried fish, and it was like a whole fish with its eyes intact and everything. And I was like, I can't eat this. It's looking at me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Turn it around. Made my ex-husband eat it instead.
There you go. Yeah, I've also learned like if I don't know the like if I don't see the shape of what it was, I'm generally okay. If I know what it is by the shape, it's not. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's a
I can
weird
I
thing.
can eat shrimp and prawns. I call them prawns. I'm Australian. Uh,
Yeah.
I can eat them if they're deshelled, but if I have to take the shells off myself, it's like no, too much
Mhm.
effort. And I don't like how it feels, and it still has its eyes on.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I feel it's like the same with like what we say crawfish in the South, crawfish, uh, which is it's different than shrimp. But anyways, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
That's
Going back to the improv thing,
yes.
but I love that we had this, like, we opened this conversation up a little bit, because there's a lot to this conversation that needs to happen in improv and in general
Right.
for a long time. It needs to continue happening, but it needs to be something that becomes part of the forefront, is the accessibility of improv.
Right.
That
Well,
being said, oh, go ahead.
yeah, so I
No,
was
you're
just
good.
thinking back to so I mentioned my nonverbal improv show that I did. The last time we performed the show, we did it at the San Diego Improv Festival.
Mm.
Was that last year? I think it was last year. Like, so much has happened. It was like February last year. But for that show, we asked even the audience to applaud using ASL. With, you know, or like jazz hands, which is basically the same.
Right.
Just because I was trying to think about how to make it more accessible for yeah, because applauding not so great when you have sound sensory processing issues sometimes as well. Like, that's yeah. So that was something that I intentionally put in to try and be more accessible, even though I don't know that there was anyone in the audience that would have made a difference too. It was important.
But you never know. I mean, and that's the thing, is you never know, because I've learned that there's a lot of people who have something, and either one, don't realize it, or two, they just aren't comfortable sharing it, or sharing their accessibility needs, because they think that people are going to have that preconceived idea of judging them, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, oh, now you're going to be you're going to be a problem, you're going to be the hard student, you know. And so I think that a lot of people just are, like, afraid of doing that. It's okay, say what you need. People want to make sure, if they're willing to be accessible, people want to make sure that they are giving you the accessibility that you need. So I think that that's one thing, is don't be afraid to ask for it, because if they say no, then you know it's probably not a great company to be taking classes with. And if they say yes, then you're like, great, they're willing to work with it. You know, and again, even with ADA, reasonable accommodations. It's not like, oh, I need a spa once a day for 5 days because that's what I need. Because ADA is going to be like, that's not a reasonable accommodation. Maybe it is for a certain amount of people, maybe, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I need to get up up to the second floor, and you only have a staircase, and I can't take the stairs. Well, that's a reasonable accommodation for the building to accommodate.
Yes.
And so it's like, and I remember someone had said they were in a wheelchair and they wanted to take classes, and they were told they couldn't, which is a terrible thing to hear from a place, not a place, but like a community in general that tries, that says that they're for everyone, and actually having to tell people that they can't take classes because of the way that their building is set up. That it kind of contradicts itself in its own way.
Well, hopefully that means that with everything happening over Zoom now, it's a little bit more accessible for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get into the building.
And like you laugh about it, but it's like so funny how, like, it's like, why can you not just get in a building that works? Like, it's so weird how it's like we laugh about it because it's just so preposterous, like, in its own way. And it's like, this is so preposterous that people can't even get into the building, like. And like, you're totally fine with it.
I'm not supposed to laugh at because I'm autistic and my emotions just respond in weird ways.
Oh no, but no, it's all good. It's just like that's the thing, is like, even then it's like, I laugh about it because it's just so ridiculous that it's like, you can't just get like a lift of some kind, like, or find a different building, like. Like, I have nothing to say, like, it's like. But I also know that, like, with shows, like, audience members are like, I'm old, I can't get up the stairs, I guess I can't see the show, can you give me a refund? Then the company starts losing money, and it's like, it's not just for a small group of people. There are people who can't climb a staircase, like, just in general. Like, and so it's just like, I don't know, that's a whole nother, we could talk about this for hours, I think. But on that being said, when you're taking improv classes or seeing shows, or hanging out with improv people, what feels what like when you like what feels like like if you're, let me see if I can phrase this, hold on. If you're in a class,
Mhm.
what makes you feel as if it feels like it's an inclusive space, or a space that is accessible? Like, what are some things that either the instructor does, or the students do, or the company does, that makes you feel like you're included and have your accessibility needs met?
Um, well, accessibility stuff is not something I've had to like request accommodations
Sure.
for, especially because when I started doing improv
But like
classes
maybe,
before I knew that.
right. But that's the thing with me too. But
But
maybe like a sensory friendly like class or something.
well, lighting would be an issue, or
Mm,
could be an issue.
absolutely.
The after, like socializing afterwards, it would be a challenge sometimes. Like I'm not good in bars,
Hmm.
for sound, like, like it's hard for me to concentrate when there's a lot of
Uh, yeah, I feel the
so that's
exact
the
same
thing.
way.
um what what got me to like stay and like doing classes consistently, I started out training with Leela in San Francisco, and um their kind of motto is truthful artistic play.
Mm,
So they want people to be their authentic selves. Just be yourself in a scene, basically. Bring all your life experience, do all of that. And so having permission to be my authentic self uh, really helped me. I have struggled a lot with being comfortable expressing everything about myself sometimes.
hmm.
um Growing up as a weird kid, undiagnosed autistic, like
Hmm.
yeah, I was not, people make fun of me for various things, and it was a lot easier for me to just be on my own sometimes. So suddenly I found this community where I could be myself and people accepted me and all my weirdness, and that was the biggest thing for me.
Mm. I and that's great, because I've learned that like improv, I find a bunch of weirdos in improv, and I love it. I love it because I feel like, and I'll be honest, like there are schools that I've taken from, different places that I've taken from, where I'm like, yeah, these people get my brain, like this is great. And there are times where I'm like, I feel like I should not be here.
Mhm.
And when I get those feelings, I start to have to be like, is it me, or is it something else? And it's hard to have that conversation, because it's like, it shouldn't be me. I should be here, and I should be having fun, and I should feel like I'm included. And I feel like if I feel like the odd person out, then I always feel like it's my fault. But I feel like it shouldn't be my fault. It's that something else is not working. And I want people to know it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's
Mhm.
something else in the system that's flawed. Because it is supposed to be something that is for everyone. So if it's not, again, to reiterate it, if it doesn't feel like something's clicking with you, try somewhere else. Unless you're like dead set on this school, then see like where in, like why is it not working, and taking a look at that. It's like, is it the teachers, is it the student, is it the curriculum, is
Mhm.
it is it the fact that, maybe, like, for me, I have light sensitivity, like maybe the lights are too bright. Like, it could be as simple as that. And it's a matter of like, is there another classroom where there's not as many lights, or can we not use these bright fluorescent lights that are really uncomfortable on my eyes? Or like, is it okay if I just wear like fake sunglasses to class? Like, and it's like, see if that helps, because I know that sometimes when lights are too bright, I get a real bad headache. I can't keep my eyes open. It's really rough. But it's also like, I've also been in classes where I'm like, today I get chronic migraines. So today I've got a migraine. I just can't function. Like, I would rather be in class, and I know I'm there. I want to support, but I like just need to sit in a chair in every scene, or like, I just need to watch today. I can't participate.
Mhm.
And then if you get pushback and the teacher's like, no, you have to work in order to do this, then it's probably not the best place, because they're not wanting to accommodate. And it's pretty easy to tell if someone is in need of the break, or if they're just lazy. It's pretty easy. You can
Yes.
pretty much determine the difference pretty quickly. So that's what I would say. But on that note, accessibility, inclusivity, equity, diversity, all this stuff included, but with that conversation kind of off to the side, in general, what do you feel makes a good improviser? Or I guess someone had said they don't believe in good or bad. Successful. What makes a successful improviser to you?
Um, I think authenticity
Hmm.
is definitely a big one. So I mean, that's definitely a lesson that I took away from Leela, and it served me well,
Hmm.
doing my own unique kind of thing. Um, uh, I'm bluntly honest, like that's an autistic
Oh,
trait.
it sure is. Yeah, sure is.
And it's something that I feel like a lot of
It goes back to that social. It's like not being
right,
aware of where in the social aspect that should fall.
that it's something that neurotypical people generally, like, they have social etiquette that they are supposed to follow, and so they can't easily get past that even in an improv scene where you have permission to.
Hmm.
Whereas for me, where that's like my natural state, it's much easier, and so people have kind of resonated with that. That's something that they've really appreciated about watching me perform, is seeing all of this like stuff that's normal for me to just say, but would be uncomfortable for them to say. Because I will say like really uncomfortable things, or I like sometimes I'll intentionally make someone uncomfortable in a scene, knowing they're okay with me making them uncomfortable in a scene. Like I'm
Hmm.
not like gonna do it to somebody I don't know.
Right.
Um,
Which again, going off of the comfortability, I know that when I'm on teams, I remember we had a rehearsal for a troupe that I'm in, and I loved that day because it was like we were doing this game where it's stunt double. Stunt doubles was the game, and they had said, whoever's on stage doing this game, go ahead and take a minute now to ask your scene partners where their comfortability level is. And everyone kind of talked it out, and people are like, oh, like I've got a bad back, so don't jump on my back, but anything else is fine. Or people are like, I got, weak knees, or some people are just like, I trust you, let's do this. And
mhm.
so I loved having that. And they said, even though we've known each other for so long, we want to make sure if we're doing something like that, even before the show starts, if we know we're playing a game like that, to just reiterate it with each person. Because maybe it's like, oh, I said go ahead and do everything, but maybe today my back hurts, or today my arm is like really like don't touch my arm. But it's like before I said I was fine with everything, maybe today I'm not. So I love that the idea of getting that, like knowing that, like if you're comfortable
Right.
doing something with some like especially like physical moves or whatever, or saying something that's like really deep and dark or whatever, if you know
Mhm.
that that person's gonna take that off or not be like then it's great. But if you don't know, then the best is either to ask or to not do it, and just ask later, like, if I was to like jump on your, like, could I jump on your back in a scene, would that be okay or not? But don't
Right.
just assume.
There, I do feel like there are a lot of improvisers that are having those conversations pre-performance and pre
Hmm.
like rehearsal now, but there are ways to approach it in scenes if you haven't had that conversation in advance, right? And I'll
Hmm.
give you an example because I've done this.
Great. I love it. I was gonna be another question, was
Uh,
any favorite moments from scenes, but I love, so this is great.
I used to perform with this group for Leela called Yum, and the core group was together for like 2 years. And so there's this one guy that I performed with. Um, Sometimes like we would get into like weird scenes, and it would go like I would take things in weird places. And so like I played this character that just liked licking things in the scene. It was like
Hmm.
licking weird stuff. I was like licking blood. Um, and then at one point I was like, I want to lick your tongue. And he didn't feel comfortable with it. So like I said no. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't force myself on him. But
Right.
then later on in the show, he brought the characters back and let me lick his tongue. So like he changed his mind and gave me
Great.
permission later.
Well, I
But
think
I
it's
was laughing if
also
I
some,
hadn't asked in the scene,
yeah.
right?
Well, I was gonna say that's also a great thing I was gonna point out, is that the person might have been like, Absolutely not," but then the way that you respected the choice,
Mhm.
he was like, "Oh, I know that she'll know when to stop," or if I'm like, "That's not where I want to go." Okay, got it. As opposed to being like, "Oh, come on, why don't you want to do it?" Then it's like you don't know where that person's gonna lie if you say no as an improviser and no as a human being.
Mhm.
Um, and no as a character. But I think because the boundary was established and it wasn't crossed at all. It was like,
Right.
and it's like, okay, great. I said no, you said okay, no problem. Now I feel like I can trust you. And I think that that's what's great, is letting the other person decide. I mean, again, that's how it should be in general, is
Yes.
consent.
Well,
Which,
I've done a lot of learning about consent
yeah,
and
which is,
boundaries over the years.
and it's also interesting to me because like I started to understand. I mean, not that I started to understand. Like I always knew that like consent was important, but like with the idea of consent and accessibility and all these things, is like I'll watch scenes and someone will do something and I'm like, ooh, don't know if you should have said
You can
that, or
tell.
like,
You
ugh.
can tell if the performers were not comfortable
Yeah.
where it went.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So on a completely different segue, um, there's always this thing of, I feel like a lot of newer improvisers feel like they're a little intimidated because, especially if they're like in a jam or like a lottery where they're playing with more experienced improvisers, it can feel intimidating. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's brand new, maybe jumped into a jam for the first time, has never done improv before, and is playing with an experienced improviser who's like a graduate of so many programs, is doing stuff to make them feel like their choices are valid, but also a way for, and then how would you also have this experienced improviser find ways to help this person feel supported? So it's a twofold question on how can they both, essentially, how can they both shine in the scene, I guess.
Right. Well, I think for the inexperienced one, trust that the other person is going to make you look good.
Mm,
Um, because that's what they're there for. They're experienced
mhm.
for a reason, and they will make that effort to help you not fail.
I love it.
I'm trying to remember the specific advice that I heard from a friend of mine. Gave me a piece of advice specifically on this thing, but I can't remember what the exact phrasing was, and I hate that I can't say that right now. But it's just basically, make the other person, the less experienced person, look good. Like find a way to incorporate even their like discomfort if they're finding like doing something uncomfortable. Make it make sense.
Hmm.
It's just yeah, I guess that's because I used to be more like I want to be the clever one.
Right.
And like I don't mind if like I'm making somebody else uncomfortable. It's like
Right.
no, that's not the mark of a good improviser. The mark of a good
Yeah.
improviser is making a less experienced improviser look like they're more experienced than they are.
I love that. Speaking of that, actually, when we were talking about what makes a successful improviser, where would you place funny on like a scale of 1 to 10? Like, in order to be a strong or a successful improviser, how funny do you need to be on a scale of 1 to 10?
I don't think it's important. I feel like where I've gotten the most laughs have been in those unexpected moments when I wasn't trying to be funny. I was just coming from that like really honest place and saying something that might have been uncomfortable or like would have been like a social faux pas in a regular kind of
Hmm.
situation, but in an improv scene, you're just saying what other people are thinking.
Yep.
Just saying it
Yep.
out. Those are the moments that people really connect with the most and get the bigger laughs,
Uh huh.
than like just trying to go for the cheap joke.
I had a moment. It was like recently. I was taking a Jane Austen improv class. Shout out to Improv Theater. I absolutely loved it. And one time I was doing a scene, and I'm not super versed in Jane Austen because I've not really read any of the books. I haven't seen any of the movies. I don't know much about Jane Austen. I loved that class. It was so wonderful. But we're doing a scene, and at one point, my scene partner said something, and I just went, "Yes, you're correct. You've hit the well. I guess you've hit the nail on the head. If that's a term that we're familiar with in these times." And it got like the biggest like Zoom laugh. I mean, we were on Zoom, but it got like LOL in the chat with like the origin of that term. And I was like, I don't know if it was in the 1800s or not. Found out it was like circa 1430, but it was one of those moments where like I just went with the line and then was like, maybe that's not time period. So let me just kind of like,
Mhm.
and I've done that where I've done like murder mystery shows where it's like takes place in the 60s, And people are like, "Oh, I love the Backstreet Boys," and I'm like, "Oh yes, I'm sure they would be such a wonderful band 30 years from now. I just haven't heard of them." You know, like
Oh
making
yeah,
that.
I will call out things that
Yeah,
are not appropriate, or like
yeah,
I'll start like digging into the detail of something that is not really relevant to the scene, but because
yeah.
I found it interesting, like that's the shiny thing I want to talk about now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like I love doing that because it's like it's actually funny because it wasn't something where I was like, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna intentionally say this nail on the head thing and then talk about maybe it's not in time period. I was not planning on it. And I said the nail on the head thing, and then I'm like, if that's something that happened in the 1800s question mark. I was like, you get the idea. And then it was funny because I was like, wait a second. I made the choice to say the phrase, and then I was like, wait a second, I don't know, maybe that's not it, but it worked
Mm.
out. Um, so I have one more question for you.
Yes,
Also, the sun has started going down, which is why my room has gotten a lot darker as the
that's
conversation has
okay.
gone
I
on.
have a fake sunset in my
There you
room.
go. And I was like, I'll just turn on a light, and I was like, then I got to get up and go turn the light switch on. So I was like, I'm just gonna leave it as it is. Whatever. So I've got like my video is like very grainy. I'm like trying to like grab all the grain. Anyway, you can probably see it though, how grainy it is. But yeah. So my last question that I have for you is this is the reason why I've done this summit, which I kind of prepped you on a little bit ahead of time because it's a pretty loaded question. But people know that I do a lot of improv. I've done, Second City, UCB, Comedy Sports, IO West, RIP, Improv Theater, Rogue Improv, Improv LA. I've done so much improv, and there's more that Tara Copeland School, musical improv school. I mean, there's so many. I can't even like name. I'm missing some that I know were great. But I consistently hear the question, Spencer, you do a lot of improv. Where should I take improv?
Mhm.
And I can never really answer this question because it just feels like I don't know where to direct people. So if someone came up to you and said, Dominica, where should I take improv? Just out of the blue, or if someone that you know is like, you take a lot of improv, what is like one tip or some kind of advice you'd give to someone in order to start their improv journey?
Well, at first I'd ask what are they wanting to get out of it? Like what's their kind of style that they're interested in, because there are so many schools. In the time of Zoom improv with the pandemic, there's so many more choices
Hmm.
available to them as well, because suddenly they can take classes in another time zone, another city, another country if they want. Um, so I can just talk about the ones that I'm familiar with. I haven't taken classes with any of them online, so I
Yeah.
don't know. But I can talk for I know like Leela is doing online classes, and they're the ones that I went through their entire 7-level program in person.
Hmm.
All of this happened. I also trained with Marcus Sams in San Francisco, and this was before he started his improv theater company, but he's running Moment Improv Theater, and he's developed like some specific stuff for the Zoom stage, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is pretty exciting. So he's developed techniques specifically for online format and doing a lot of classes on that sort of thing. So those are my two main ones that I would suggest people to have a look at. So if you've liked like the truthful, authentic play aspect, that would be Leela. And yeah, and then another theater company that I have liked seeing shows of, haven't done any classes with, would be the Hideout in Austin, Texas. I know
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing classes and stuff online as well. So that'd be another one to look at.
Great. I love it. I lied. I said that was the last question, but I still have another question. Do you have anything you want to plug or pitch
I do.
before we get off? Yeah.
So because the pandemic has like stopped live theater on a stage, I haven't been performing on the Zoom stage yet, but I did decided I still wanted to do some improv stuff because I have an improv business that I
Mm,
started like 2 years ago, um, for the shows that I developed, but also like videoing other people's shows. Can't do that anymore. So I decided to like do some artwork for improv stuff. So this shirt that I'm wearing is one of my designs. Improv San Francisco. I used to be a tour guide before the pandemic hit. So that all the different letters of improv are like specific San Francisco references. So that was the first design I did. And then I started, I wanted to do a bit of other stuff. So I made like this, I took a series of animals, like I like drawing, like cartoon style animals. I'm a big Disney fan. So like I made, this is a green screen. So this is my sarcastic yes and elephant. So I started with that and I posted that online, and I just asked for suggestions for an animal and an emotion from people to inspire other ones, other yes animals.
I love yes animals. It's such a funny name. It's such a fun name.
It works. I started like yes and animals. I'm like, no, I was combine it. Short animals.
Yeah.
Then one of the a couple of suggestions I got was flustered and aardvark, so I made this guy.
That's great. Those are awesome.
And then the most recent one I did, someone suggested quokka, which is like this fuzzy little creature from the island of Rottnest in Western Australia. I'm familiar with them because I'm from Western Australia. So I've seen them up close in person, but the person suggested it, American person. I'm like, how did you know what quokkas are? And what exuberant was the emotion that I got. So
oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, so I've been doing those designs, and they're available on my improv business website, which is improvativeproductions.com. And hopefully sometime next year I'll be doing a show with one of my improv partners that I haven't mentioned in this interview, Diana Brown, and I do this show called The Secret Lives of Villains, which is inspired by, I did this like villain workshop with one of the owners of the Hideout Theater when we were in Alaska for a festival, and so that inspired this villain show. And so we took that show to Kentucky last year for an improv festival there.
Definitely not this year.
It was over a year ago now. I haven't been to a festival in over a year. But yeah, so we're currently working on translating that show, making it a Zoom format.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I did lie. I said that I had the last question, and then I lied and said I had another question, but I lied and I have another question.
Okay.
But this is the last question. It might not be. I'm not going to say that now. I have one more question. I guess the question is, would you like to make your improv Zoom stage debut and do an improv scene with me?
Sure.
Keep talking about it.
Okay. I guess I can tell you specifically what the things are. So we've got the I is Coit Tower, the M is the Golden Gate Bridge, the P is the Pride flag, very notable in the Castro district. This is a statue that's in the middle of Union Square. And the model for the statue was a woman named Alma de Bretteville, and she was the lady who coined the term sugar daddy. Then we have the crab wheel from Fisherman's Wharf, and the V there is a sea lion from Pier 39. Very famous in San Francisco.
That's awesome. I left my video off because I wanted you to just like show it, and so I didn't want to like awkwardly pop in there.
That's okay.
Great. So let's get a suggestion. I'm gonna let you pick if you want a location, a relationship, or a word. Those are the three that this generator provides.
Wait, say location,
relationship, and word.
Let's do relationship. I'm
All
big
right.
on relationship stuff. That's one of the things I learned from Leela is like, relationship is so important. What is a relationship?
Yeah. I did iOS was a first training program I did, and they're very big on relationship. So it's like my bread and butter. Oh, there's so many like it's like I try to like kind of, anyways, they put like two, like it's like juggler and scientist. It's like what?
Okay.
Astronomer and meteor sounds fun.
Oh, so one of us is a media?
Yeah, I guess one of us is a meteor and one of us is an astronomer. Thank you,
I, I,
astronomer meteor.
I see you looking at me through that telescope.
You know, it's kind of lonely here in the science lab. I'm trying to find anyone that would talk to me, and you seemed like a good candidate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I'm very far away from you. I've
Several million miles.
I have heard that there's this big virus thing happening right now where you are. So glad you're not able to transmit that to me.
Yeah, it doesn't. It goes about 6 feet, but you know, I've learned that I'm an astronomer. I have a science background, and I know that it's a very dangerous, deadly virus. But I don't think people quite understand that not standing 6 feet apart can help spread it. But I don't know if we're going flying into space, so I think you're probably pretty safe. I don't even know if you contract it actually. Honestly, I don't know how it would work for a meteor.
Well, I mean, I guess I could come there and wipe it out by wiping all of you out. Would that help?
You know, honestly, with the stupidity of America, I think it would.
Let's see.
Yeah, great, great. That was a nice, short, sweet scene. I loved it. Yeah, and oh, that's another thing is, scenes don't have to be long. I've done. This is just a final wrap up thought for people who are watching or listening. I've been in improv scenes where uh, you bring back two characters, and my character is like, "Oh, this is awesome" to everything, and the one character, they come back and they're like, "Sir, we want you to try this new dog food." Oh, that's awesome. And then you cut the scene. It doesn't have to be a long scene. If you get the idea of the scene out, you can move on. So that was great. Thanks so much everyone for joining us for the Improv Summit today with Dominica. I hope everyone has a great day. Take care. Thank you so much. Goodbye.